Hello, I think I'm on. Hello and welcome to PMA's annual meeting. I'm Ann Norman, President of the Board of Directors for both People's Memorial Association and the Co-op Funeral Home. We will have an expanded acknowledgement in a few minutes, but up front, PMA would like to recognize that we work and live on the traditional ancestral unceded territory of the Coast Salish, Duwamish, and Suquamish nations. Thank you for attending. On behalf of the entire board and staff, we appreciate your time and dedication by being here with us. For 84 years, our members have helped People's Memorial Association advocate that everyone has access to after-death arrangements which reflect their personal values and resources. This work in funeral education and advocacy continues to be incredibly relevant and needed. In fact, in 2023, we have already testified twice at the federal and state levels to protect consumer choice. You'll hear today about last year's progress and outcomes of PMA and the Co-op Funeral Home. You'll also get an update about our internal growth and ongoing commitment for diversity and inclusion. We'll report candidly about the financial aspects of both organizations and celebrate our outreach efforts, partners, and one exceptional volunteer. To cap off today's gathering, our keynote speaker is Deborah Streahle, a social and cultural historian of medicine and a guest curator at the Intrepid Museum in New York City. She studies the relationships among science, technology, and care in the 20th century United States. Her current dissertation traces how the culture of death and dying changed in the 1960s. PMA's archives had been essential in her research. To make this virtual annual meeting as successful as possible, here is some required information and housekeeping. Throughout the meeting, we will be putting links to information in the chat box. If you click on the chat at the bottom of the screen, the chat box should appear on the right side. If you'd like to see today's agenda, we're putting a link to that document in the chat box now. If you have any questions, type it in the Q&A function, which can be opened at the bottom of the screen. Our communications manager, Beverly Trick, will be monitoring incoming questions. She will let us know if there is something we need to answer or clarify. Due to the webinar format, we will ask for vocal affirmations of motions during the meeting from the board members. After the board members have voted, a poll will pop up on screen for attendees to vote. Our time together today should be about 2 hours. Stick around because at the end, we'll be giving out the gift baskets to our raffle. As you probably know, our spring fundraiser is underway. You can give it a boost by entering the raffle now. It's simple. Before the end of the annual meeting, go to www.peoplesmemorial.org/donate, and we're putting a link in the chat right now to make it easy. Win either the gift basket or the knowledge that you are ensuring all Washingtonians are supported with accurate funeral information, including you. Don't forget to look for our follow-up email with a recording of this event and all the links shared today. All right, let's get this meeting moving. I'm going to turn it over to Megan.
Thank you. Hi, many of you already know me. I'm Megan Walker, PMA's board secretary. After registering for this annual meeting webinar, the meeting agenda was emailed to you and in the chat. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda for this year's meeting?
Anne, could you make that motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Anne. Would someone like to second?
I second.
Thank you, Dennis. We're now opening the poll. The poll will close in 30 seconds. We will review the poll after our verbal vote from the board members. Board members, please take yourself off mute for voting. All in favor of approving the agenda for the 2023 annual meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, say nay. Thank you, board members. You can mute yourselves again. We are now closing the poll, and here are the results. The ayes have it. The agenda is approved. In addition to the agenda, the meetings of last year's annual meeting were emailed to those who registered for this webinar. The link to last year's annual meeting minutes are being placed in the chat now. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from last year's annual meeting?
I move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you, Anne. Would someone like to second?
I second the approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Ivani. We're now opening the poll. And the poll will close in 30 seconds. We'll review the poll after a verbal vote from the board members. Board members, take yourselves off mute. All in favor of approving the agenda for the 2023 annual meeting?
Aye.
For the meeting minutes, please say aye.
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 Those opposed,
Aye.
say nay. Thank you.
So I think we can now turn it over to Dennis. Oh, I'm sorry, I did it too fast. Sorry.
Oh, looks like the ayes have it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Megan. We're now going to show a video that illustrates our land acknowledgement, and I'd like to acknowledge at this time Francine Daisy, E&I committee member who wrote this. You can find the text of the land acknowledgement in the chat now. Please join in if you wish to read out loud. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the People's Memorial Association operates and assists families and individuals with their end-of-life needs. For thousands of years, this traditional land has been the home for many indigenous peoples located across eastern and western Washington and has provided sustenance for life to its fullest. We are grateful to have the opportunity to respectfully work and provide assistance to the people of this land and to continue this tradition of recognizing life as well as end of life. Now we want to share some pre-recorded videos about why equity and inclusion is important, what we have done recently, and a few of our future endeavors.
My name is Dennis Barnes, and I have been a member of People's Memorial for about 30 years. Over that time, PMA has served our family well, and I have called on their services for two of my elders. PMA's future vision states that everyone has access to after-death arrangements that reflect their personal values and resources. I serve on the PMA Equity and Inclusion Committee because I would like to see that vision realized for communities that are not as well served by PMA due to cultural, monetary, or other obstacles. The Equity and Inclusion Committee is working to help PMA fulfill their promise, meeting the end-of-life needs for all communities. My name is Dennis Barnes.
Hello, my name is Colleen, and I've been a member of PMA for 3 years.
I'm delighted to share today some of the recent activities we've been working on for equity and inclusion. First and foremost, we made equity and inclusion an ongoing commitment to the organization's work. We transitioned from occasional committee meetings to a monthly responsibility to ensure consistent and meaningful progress. Second, we prioritize board attentiveness to diversity. Each board meeting has protected time to learn about and discuss equity and inclusion issues. Some topics we have explored are how to create responsive after-death care within changing cultures and societies, how we may better commit to supporting Native American populations, how capitalism impacted Black and African American funeral homes and consumers, also how we can be intentional in recruiting diverse board members. Finally, we crafted a land acknowledgement. You saw and hopefully said it earlier. It was important for us to develop one which aligned with PMA's work in funeral education and advocacy. We recognize that land acknowledgement is only one step towards meaningful support. I'm now going to let Francine and Waivoni share future activities.
Hi there, I'm Francine Daisy. As a PMA member for 15 years, I'm proud to share some of the future equity and inclusion work we'll be focusing on. Equity work is an ongoing journey, one that asks us to do better once we know better, to paraphrase Maya Angelou. To that end, as a committee, board, and organization, PMA will continue to actively self-reflect on our commitments. We will continue to systematically evaluate who we are serving, who we are not serving, and why. As we identify communities that we are not fully serving, we will humbly reach out to see how we might provide support. We will follow the lead of those within the underserved communities. We will diversify our associations by being mindful that we advocate for everyone in Washington State to have funeral and memorial services which reflect their values and preferences. I'll now let Waivoni add what this future looks like operationally. Thank you. Hi there, I'm Fran.
Thanks, Francine. My name is Waivoni Ray, and I have been a PMA member for approximately 30 years. I'm excited to share with you about two specific ways we are planning to galvanize and organize around equity and inclusion. The first way is that PMA will find new ways to build upon the success of the Financial Funeral Assistance Program. By finding additional funding, we will be able to help those in poverty honor their loved ones without going into debt. Secondly, within the next 2 years, PMA will present its Ducks in a Row series in Spanish and Chinese. This will expand opportunities for planning to individuals and communities in the top 2 non-English languages in Washington, in ways that are culturally appropriate. We know equity is a journey. We continue to move towards being an organization that makes our vision a reality, where everyone has access to after-death arrangements that reflect their personal values and resources. Thanks, Francine.
Thank you all. And I want to extend thanks to the board for creating the Equity and Inclusion Committee in 2021 and for their continuing support. Now here's Amanda Stock with a report on PMA and the spring fundraiser.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. 2022 was another great year for PMA, so I'd like to share a few highlights. The biennial funeral home price survey was completed. Many thanks to the volunteers and board members who spent countless hours helping us collect general price lists for this important project. We surveyed 209 Washington State funeral homes, and of those, 54% posted their general price lists on their website. Compared to the national average of just 18%, Washington State is absolutely leading the way in pricing transparency. This level of transparency is a direct result from our price survey. Funeral homes have come to expect this from us and report that families walk into their businesses with this survey in hand, educated about what they expect to pay for services. Alternatively, about 20% of these funeral homes did not provide their general price list to us after 3 requests. This was higher than we anticipated and only goes to show how critical it is for PMA to compile this survey. Though alkaline hydrolysis or aquamation was only legalized in Washington in 2019, we found that 57 funeral homes are now offering this service. I was surprised to see that. Also legalized back in 2019 was natural organic reduction or human composting. I was very happy to see that 20% of funeral homes are now offering this option through 4 contractors. And remember, if you don't see these 2 options on the general price list of your local funeral home, call them and let them know it's something you're interested in. We know from experience that funeral homes will want to find a way to guarantee your business by expanding their offerings. As a side note, Return Home is our new contracted partner for natural organic reduction. So PMA members are now able to access reduced member pricing for natural organic reduction from both Return Home and Recompose. More information and detailed pricing is on our website. Back to the price survey. Over 70% of funeral homes increased their prices for cremation and burial since 2020. To find the average costs for funeral services, please visit our website and download your copy of the price survey. But what I can tell you today is that your choice of funeral home is crucial, as the cost of cremation, for example, varies by a whopping 770%. What a powerful reminder of the difference it can make when you shop around and use PMA resources to plan ahead to assure that you receive the arrangements you want at a price you can afford. We hosted an intimate group of guests at our Queen Anne office in Seattle for our first in-person event since the beginning of the global COVID-19 pandemic. This special event was in memory of those who lost their lives during the pandemic. Our guests enjoyed exploring PMA's history, our current projects, and we all shared ideas about the future of the funeral industry. We celebrated all that PMA has accomplished in its 83 years and honored the funeral directors for their work in supporting families through a global pandemic. The Funeral Financial Assistance Fund remains one of the only sources of financial assistance for funeral services in Washington State. Thanks to a grant we received in 2021 and to our generous supporters like you, we helped a record-breaking 41 families last year. This is 10 more families than we helped in the year prior. Each family who qualifies receives $635 to help offset the cost of cremation, simple burial, or aquamation services. Unfortunately, the need is greater than the resources we have available in this fund, so the number of families supported will slow down a little bit until we can reestablish that fund. More people than ever are donating their unused and unwanted cemetery plots to PMA, and they're able to report that in-kind donation on their taxes. We then sell these plots at a steep discount to those in need and invest those funds right back into the community. If you'd like to donate a plot, please email info@peoplesmemorial.org. Our contracted partners continue to provide our member families with exemplary service. 97% of families reported they were satisfied with the services and merchandise offered by these funeral homes, and 97% reported they received no upselling when meeting with the contracted funeral home. Membership with PMA provides the gift of preparedness for yourself and loved ones, and we remain committed to partnering only with businesses that abide by our code of ethics, so we can guarantee you and your loved ones will be treated with dignity and respect. There's more to see about how 2022 went at PMA in our annual report. We're now sending it digitally to be mindful of how we utilize our resources, so please visit our website to check it out. Finally, our spring fundraiser is happening now. So I invite you to make a gift to PMA today to help PMA achieve its mission. Less than half of our budget comes from our new member dues, so we depend on generous members like you to continue supporting our funeral education and advocacy efforts. Every dollar you give is invested right back into your community to help people make informed decisions about the end of life. Your gift makes a huge impact not only on the people who access our services, but to their entire families. Thank you for being here and for your support and participation. We are celebrating 84 years this year because of active members like you. Thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Good morning.
Hello, I'm Chris Ronk, and I'm the lead funeral director at the Co-op Funeral Home, PMA's contracted provider for the greater Seattle area. As a PMA member myself since 2007, I'm especially honored to get to share with you about the newest option available through the Co-op Funeral Home, natural organic reduction. Maybe you've heard about this option online or in the news. Some people refer to it as terramation or human composting. I'm afraid I don't have enough time today to get into the finer details of how the process works, but I encourage you to visit PMA's webinar library to learn more about natural organic reduction. Instead, today I want to tell you about the distinct privilege that I had this year of serving the Co-op Funeral Home's first family to choose this option. It was a perfect fit for this family and their lifelong commitment to the environment. Their loved one was definitely an impactful, forward-thinking individual, and that was obvious from the many comments on his obituary page on our website, thanking him for his advocacy for marginalized communities. The family was a pleasure to work with. You may already be aware that you can work directly with one of our contracted natural organic reduction partners, Recompose and Return Home. These are both wonderful options and available at discounted rates for PMA members. Why then might a family want to access these services through the Co-op Funeral Home instead of going to one of these other contracted providers directly? There are a couple of reasons. Perhaps a loved one has previously made cremation, burial, or aquamation arrangements through the Co-op Funeral Home, in some cases even setting aside funds for the final arrangement. Prepayment arrangements can be easily adapted to meet changing needs. We're happy to offer a continuity of care. Perhaps a family has chosen our funeral home at time of need, not knowing at first what the final disposition arrangements might be. We can care for your loved one while that decision is being made. And if natural organic reduction is chosen, we like to have that option available through our funeral. One thing we hear often is that when someone has worked with us before to care for a loved one, seeing a familiar face is a relief. Working again with a funeral director you already have an established and trusted relationship with can afford a level of comfort during a difficult time. If this applies to you, it is our honor and privilege to serve you again, even when we do wish we were meeting again under happier circumstances. Members who choose natural organic reduction through the Co-op Funeral Home pay a package price of $3,950 for the simple package And if the family elects to have a laying-in ceremony, the package price is $4,375. I hope this is helpful information for you in learning the options that are available. Reach out to our team at the Co-op Funeral Home or People's Memorial Association with your questions, and we'll be happy to assist. Thank you for your time today. Hello.
I'm always glad to hear about the good work that PMA is doing. And Chris, you did a great job at explaining natural organic reduction. This last year has been one of big changes for the funeral home. After the after effects of working in the funeral home during the pandemic took its toll, and we lost over half of our staff to burnout. I want to give a great big shout out to our lead funeral director, Chris Ronk, who you just met. Chris has been with me since we were young interns at the co-op, and he was instrumental in helping keep us functioning during this difficult time. By the end of the year, we had 3 new interns and an administrative assistant. Our fantastic team consists of our lead funeral director, Chris, our funeral director interns, Nisa Cooley, Ariana Bates, and Kylie Lewis, and our newest addition, our administrative assistant, Amy Valine. This brilliant team of people have worked tirelessly to provide our members with the compassionate care that has come to represent People's Memorial. Over this last year, they have revitalized our office presence, capturing more calls live and providing a friendly presence to office visitors. We still ask that our visitors schedule their arrival so we can ensure that we can be available to you in the fullest way possible. 2022 ended up being a much busier year, both in volume and in service requests. By the end of the year, we had served a total of 860 families. Cremation is still the most popular choice, with our members choosing cremation 89% of the time. But interest in green burials and aquamations were both increased compared to previous years, as well as a greater interest in using the parlor space in the Queen Anne Baptist Church for funeral services. The Co-op Funeral Home remains one of the top 5 busiest funeral homes in King County and the top 20 in Washington State. This is impressive for our small team, and I'm incredibly proud of our staff for their hard work and dedication.
If you've ever attended a PMA webinar, my face is probably a familiar one. My name's Beverly, and I'm the communications manager. 2022 was quite a busy year for us on the outreach and education front. Between guesting on our very first podcast, having our first in-person event at our Queen Anne office, as Amanda mentioned, and hosting 35 of our own classes, let's just say I'm more coffee than person these days. Over 1,600 people joined us in 2022 to learn about everything from the proposed changes to the 1984 funeral rule to how to become a medical legal death investigator. As expected, our annual Green Funerals Week was a big draw for attendance last year, so of course we'll be bringing it back again this spring. With the increasing interest from the community about the environmental impact of death care, we're excited to feature presentations on the very first aquamation to take place in Washington State, and what you can do with the soil returned to your family after natural organic reduction. I'll be talking about environmental impact of a conventional burial, and we'll even get to hear about what you can do to create meaningful celebrations even as funeral options expand and change. We'll close the week out with a guided tour of Return Home and a unique crafting workshop facilitated by the Grateful Dead. If all this green funeral stuff is a little outside your comfort zone, no worries. In June, the Aljoya Thornton Place community in Seattle's Northgate neighborhood will be hosting us for our tried and true Ducks in a Row series, all in person. Seating will be limited, so you'll want to keep an eye on our events calendar to make sure you sign up early to save your spot. If the idea of grappling with Seattle traffic isn't exactly your idea of fun, you can always visit our webinar library like Chris mentioned earlier, or check out our YouTube channel to watch recordings of those sessions from the comfort of your own home. As you heard Waivoni mention earlier, we're working to expand our programming into Spanish and Chinese in collaboration with several community partners. PMA is committed to ensuring all Washingtonians have access to the information they need about essential end-of-life subjects like estate planning, advanced directives for healthcare, and funeral options. Rather than take my word for it, though, I'd love to share some of the feedback we received from the families served by our contracted providers. They say it better than I ever could about what it means to be part of the PMA community. We're now going to take a quick 5-minute break to stretch our legs and top off our coffees. I know we've already covered so much since we started the meeting. So join us back here in 5 minutes when we're going to talk financials, announce our volunteer of the year, and more.
Welcome back, everyone, from our break. I want to again thank all of our sponsors who made this event possible. Now I would like to present the financial report. Regarding People's Memorial Association, 2022 was another great year for PMA. We brought in a total of $273,000, and we ended the year with a net of revenues over expenses of $17,000. You make what we do possible. Advocate, educate, and serve you. Individual giving is by far the largest contributor to our annual revenue, making up 62% of last year's income for a total of $108,000. Contributions from individual donors. Some of our most successful fundraising efforts of the year were from our spring appeal, raising 6% more than expected. General contributions brought in over 25% of our goal, and Give Big raised 30% more than our goal. Each one of you have the deepest gratitude for your donations and support throughout the year. We are growing. New member dues are the second largest source of income at 26%. And our digital document storage continues to be a valuable benefit for only $25 per person. This small but needed service made up 2% of overall income, bringing in nearly $5,000. And did you know we sell burial plots? We receive donated burial plots from those who cannot use them, and we resell them at a discount. Those sales also brought in 2% of our income, with a total of $6,800. We support the community, so corporate and foundation giving is an important reflection of that commitment. Last year, such giving made up 7% of our budget, bringing in a total of $18,000. We hope to expand these opportunities. If you own a business, know of one that we should contact, or have a connection with a foundation that would support our work, please let us know. You can email the executive director at director@peoplesmemorial.org. Thanks to all the hard work of our communications manager, Beverly Trick, we have a robust virtual class schedule that covers a variety of topics about planning for and dealing with the end of life. We think more people should know about our online offerings. In 2022, ticket sales revenue brought in $2,000 for the year. If you haven't had the pleasure of attending live or viewing past webinars, we encourage you to check out our full webinar library at our website. It's a wealth of knowledge and information, and we are linking it in the chat. Most of our expenses, 65%, or about $167,000, went towards payroll and benefits, as that is the core of what we provide, proactive and knowledgeable staff to support you in educating yourself and in planning for your life, as well as to advocate for you and all people in Washington State. The next largest expense category is operations. We spend about $44,000 on this category, which includes things like rent, insurance, bank fees, and member support services like postage, printing, phones, and software subscriptions. These are the basic needs to ensure that people of People's Memorial can provide that public support. Thanks to a SparkJoy grant we received in 2021, we were able to help a total of 41 families through the Funeral Assistance Fund for a total of $23,000. This is a fund for those who cannot cremate or bury their loved ones. Program services expenses cost about 4%, with spending on things like member outreach and compensation for speakers at $10,000. $7,000 was spent on professional fees, including accounting, payroll services, technology support, and phone services from member calls. Now let's move to the financial report for the Co-op Funeral Home. The funeral home's total income for the year was $998,000, which was about 7% more than expected. The funeral home's budget remains fairly consistent year after year. Member sales continue to be the main source of income. almost 770,000 was generated from sales to members, which contributes 83% of our income. Non-member sales is the second largest income generator, collecting 180,000 in this category. The third largest income category is records fees, which is money generated from our contract providers, which brought in 48,000. Life insurance sales dropped this year, bringing the total to under 2,000, and it was below expectations. Our expenses were low in 2022. The co-op funeral home spent a total of 897,000, or about 7% less than budgeted. Like the income jump, there is a story to this reduced spending. Typically, our largest expense category is payroll and benefits for compassionate and knowledgeable staff to support you during one of life's most difficult moments. Common in the funeral industry, 2022 saw challenges in retaining staff. The outcome was a reduction in staff costs, which came in 30% below budget. Subcontractors ended up being the largest category this year. Our subcontractors are the businesses that help us do what we do, like the crematory, transportation fleet, and courier services. In addition, we relied on subcontractors during times of staffing difficulties. 320,000 was spent on subcontractors. They cost 41% of our expenses. And an additional 48,000 was spent on purchasing merchandise on behalf of our families we serve, which includes things like urns and caskets. As a funeral provider, we must be responsive. A good part of what makes us accessible is our awesome answering service, which is the phone line that helps ensure that our phone is answered 24/7 to help families who have lost a loved one outside of business hours. These and other professional fees, ranging from accounting services to credit card fees for funeral arrangements, made up 8% or 69,000 of our expenses. As you know, the co-op shares office space with PMA. We pay 55,000 or 6% on rent and janitorial services to PMA. Other operating costs like dues, insurance, postage, internet, and software total 40,000. We also invested in ourselves with 10,800 supporting things like our website, paying off our loan, and employee mileage reimbursements. We invested in our planet with donations to 2 organizations for common carbon offsets and conservation efforts in the Pacific Northwest. 16,000 was spent on taxes. With an increased income generated from the high sales of a post-pandemic interest in funeral services, burials, and aquamations, combined with much lower expenses due to staffing challenges, we ended the year with an uncharacteristically high profit of 96,000. This additional profit will be used to help build up our reserves, pay off our loan, and invest in our staffing, the training, and retention. I am proud of the services that we provide to families in times of need and appreciate our staff's kind and caring services. Now I would like to turn it over to Beverly Trick to highlight the Volunteer of the Year. Thank you.
At PMA, we're blessed with incredibly talented members who are personally invested in the success and longevity of the organization. As a member of the staff, it's so gratifying to experience their connection to our mission. One of my favorite things to do each year is present the award for Volunteer of the Year. It's a chance to celebrate those many selfless contributions that take place behind the scenes and help us live up to our best dreams for who we want to be as an organization. Amanda shared with us earlier about some of the significant findings from our biennial funeral home price survey. There was so much juicy information in what she said that it's easy to miss that we surveyed 209 different Washington funeral homes. This is the most we've ever surveyed by a mile. Amanda also mentioned how some of those funeral homes were maybe not too thrilled to hear from us, requiring multiple follow-up calls. Just think about those numbers for a second. Without the support of a dedicated cadre of volunteers making calls, sending emails, scouring websites, and gathering data, this essential tool simply wouldn't exist. Especially not since we expanded the number of questions to include information on natural organic reduction, alkaline hydrolysis, and even care for children. One volunteer in particular went above and beyond during this last price survey. We would like to take this time to thank longtime member and spreadsheet superstar, Dick Switzer, our volunteer of the year. We're waiting for the plaque to come back from the engravers, but he is now part of our Hall of Fame. PMA is eternally grateful for his help in making sure Washingtonians have access to the essential financial information they need to make informed choices. PMA has been conducting the survey for decades, and we know that this transformed the funeral landscape here in Washington. Thank you, Dick, for being a key part of helping us serve so many so well.
Thank you, Beverly. And congratulations to Dick Schweitzer. Now it is time to elect the new board members and alternates. Earlier today, we emailed a link of the candidates' bios on our website to review and consider in advance. For your convenience, we're putting a link to the candidates' bios in the chat box now. Serving on the board is a commitment to the future of PMA. We truly appreciate each of these individuals coming forward to serve for 3 years. This year, we are pleased to present for your affirmative vote the roster of our board member candidates: Carrie Andrews for re-election, Dennis Barnes, and Kirsten Kaufman, who are each volunteering to serve a 3-year term. Would someone like to make a motion to approve this roster of board candidates?
I'm Cheryl Jennings, and I move that we approve this roster.
Thank you, Cheryl. Would someone like to second?
This is Wyvoni Ray, and I would like to second the motion.
Thank you, Wyvoni. We are now opening the poll. The poll will close in 30 seconds. We will review the poll after, after a verbal vote from the board members. So board members, would you please take yourself off mute for voting? All in favor of approving the roster of board candidates for the 2023 to 2026 PMA Co-op Funeral Home Board of Directors, please say aye. And those
Aye.
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 Any nays? Okay. Thank you, board members. You may mute yourself again. And I believe we are going to go over the poll. Okay. We have a 100% approval rate. So thank you very much. And now we're going to vote on the board alternates. Alternate board members commit to attend board meetings and serve on committees in a non-voting capacity for 1 year. Alternates provide stability for the board and frequently advance to full board member status. This year, we are very pleased to present for your affirmative vote the roster of our board alternate candidates. We have Laurel Sexton, who is volunteering to serve a 1-year term. Would someone like to make a motion to approve this roster of board candidates?
I'm Cheryl Jennings, and I move that we approve this roster.
Thank you, Cheryl. Would someone like to second?
This is Wyvoni, and I move to approve the roster.
And I am a third, Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now going to open the poll. The poll will close in 30 seconds again. I think what's happening is my poll is coming up, so I'll cast my vote. And board members, if you would just take yourself off mute again, all in favor of approving the board alternates for 2023 to 2024 PMA and Co-op Funeral Home Board of Directions, say aye. Those opposed, say nay.
I say aye, and I can't pick it on the phone.
Okay, any nays from the board members? All right, thank you, board members. You may mute yourself again. And we're closing the polls. Here are the results. coming soon. We have another 100% unanimous approval. So thank you. The ayes have it both times. The board member alternates are approved. And now we have officially welcomed our newly elected board members and alternates. Thank you very much. And let's take a look at some additional transitions.
Congratulations to our new board members. My name is Carrie Andrews, and I'm excited to be a newly re-elected board member, and I'm looking forward to working with our new colleagues. PMA is really the sum of its parts. Each partner, volunteer, and staff member makes the organization more influential, imaginative, and impactful. This year, we are thanking individuals in each category who are saying farewell. First, we want to recognize our long partnership with Shar Carpenter, formerly Barrett, of A Sacred Moment. Shar helped establish the Co-op Funeral Home and mentored the current managing funeral director, Kim. Shar and her company are stepping away from partnership, but both PMA and A Sacred Moment will continue to informally augment and amplify each other. Board member Nina Schoen helped organic reduction pass in Washington State to give consumers more choice and joined our board in 2020. During her tenure on our board, Nina was part of the finance committee and made sure the staff knew what was making news in the funeral industry media. Board member Scott Siegel came in and served as our treasurer. Being treasurer is not an easy task, and we appreciate him helping out with a vital part of our board duties. His positive attitude and willingness to help no matter what was a true gift to both organizations. And finally, we are saying farewell to Amanda Stock. As some of you know, she recently gave birth to her second child. And after much reflection, she has decided to spend more time with her two little ones. Both of her kids are adorable, so we totally understand her decision. Make no mistake, we will miss Amanda tremendously. As executive director, she combined the science of running an organization, like spreadsheets, with the art of embodying the mission, like creative events. We wish Amanda the best and trust this is a change in PMA's relationship with her, not an end. And that means that we are looking for a new executive director. We ask that if you know anyone who might be interested in the position, please share the job description and ask them to apply. We are placing the link to the job description in the chat. We are indebted to everyone, past and present, for PMA's success. And now I will turn it back to Beverly to introduce the keynote speaker.
Oh, okay, a little technical difficulty on my end, no worries. Well, I'm so excited to introduce you to Deborah Streahle. As Anne alluded at the beginning of today's meeting, Deborah's research has focused in on the major tidal shifts that occurred in death care in the 1960s. Joining us all the way from the East Coast this morning, she plans to share with us some of the highlights from her dissertation. You may even recognize some of the images in her slides, as Yale arranged for PMA's archives to be digitized to better preserve our rich and storied history. And also maybe to save Deborah a long flight just to look at our old dusty binders. We're grateful to her for giving us a little of her Saturday to speak today, and even more grateful for her shared passion for the subject of community-based death care advocacy and education. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Deborah.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm just going to share my screen. So give me one moment.
All right, I've got it opened up for you.
Great. All right. And can you see that okay?
Beautiful.
Great. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I hope it's been a productive meeting. And I want to say thank you to Bonnie and Beverly and everyone else behind the scenes for this invitation. I also want to thank several members that Beverly kindly connected me with. It's been a real gift, not just for my research, but on a basic human level to speak with Nancy Nijelski, Jan Snyder, and Ann Forrest Burns. The three of them shared their personal connections to PMA and kind of history with the organization, and I'm grateful. So you might wonder, why am I speaking with you today? And Beverly helpfully explained that a few months ago, I asked People's Memorial if there was any historical records, and I hit the jackpot as far as historical research goes when Beverly told me that yes, there were records dating back to the 1930s, and I was welcome to review them. So that's what I've been doing, and I'm really grateful. So as a historian of medicine and public health, I study the cultural and social history of dying and death in the US. And I came to this topic because about 10 years ago, I saw an explosion of alternative death care options. Things like alkaline hydrolysis, green cremation. What else do we have here? Eternal reefs, home funerals, not so much new as old, biodegradable shrouds and caskets. And I wondered why now, and where did this come from? So as I was looking into the history of some of the history related to this, I became particularly interested in the 1960s because it seemed like a real turning point for death care in America. So if we take just 1 year, 1963, all in rapid succession, the Catholic Church lifted its ban on cremation. Journalist Jessica Mitford published an expose of the funeral industry, and President Kennedy was assassinated. All of this was happening against a backdrop of brewing military engagement in Vietnam, Cold War tensions, and here I have a pamphlet from PMA records labeled 1950s evacuation, 1950s evacuation advisory, so you can see what was on people's minds. So Cold War tensions, decolonization across the globe, and the increasingly visible civil rights movement. So Americans were prompted to revisit their thoughts on dying and the rituals of caring for the dead. And there was, it seemed, suddenly a lot of criticism of the funeral industry and more participation in funeral and memorial societies. So while that interest in funeral reform in the 60s seemed to come out of nowhere, of course, it has a longer history, which brings us to Seattle. Here we go, Seattle, Washington in the 1930s. So in 1936, the US Postmaster General joked, there are 47 states in the Union and the Soviet of Washington. And as those of you from the area will know, Seattle has a long history of progressive radicalism. I'll note that the region was not immune to racial panic during World War II or long-standing housing discrimination, to take just two examples, but Seattle is noted for its mixed race coalitions of support for numerous social and political causes. Excuse me. So in the 1930s, the financial crisis eroded many Americans' faith in banking and big business. And while it was without question devastating for many Americans, people also emerged with a strengthened sense of self-reliance and commitment to community collaboration. The cooperative movement was one expression of this. The movement in the US dates back to the 19th century, but it gained new government support with the New Deal. While many of the collectively owned businesses were agricultural, we still see plenty of these today, there were co-ops for nearly everything, and yes, even mortuaries. The PMA, as you know, was founded in 1939. Here's the original, I have a slide here with the original Articles of Incorporation, dated February 27th, 1939, and it's from the PMA records. So it's run as a co-op. It was founded as a co-op by a group of men interested in honoring the dead without exorbitant funeral costs, which they saw as a social justice issue. People were being bullied into purchasing funerals beyond their means at a time when it seemed inappropriate for them to negotiate. So PMA started small, but it quickly established itself as a financially stable, rapidly expanding organization. By 1962, it had over 11,000 members. And for comparison, the Philadelphia Memorial Society had 300 at that time. The Chicago one had about 1,000. So it was really a large organization. And PMA became a model for other memorial societies. The Bay Area Funeral Society adapted many of PMA policies for its own members. And while it's not the first, it may be the first memorial society, it wasn't the first organization to try to make decent funerals more accessible or to have more options. There were also cooperatively run mortuaries with in-house funeral directors, and as well as small burial societies, usually run by religious organizations. There were also many unions, fraternal societies, and mutual aid organizations that provided some amount of death benefits and funeral insurance. But there are a couple of things that make PMA and other memorial societies distinctive. One factor was the low barrier to entry. Once someone joined, aside from a modest membership fee, they didn't really have any other obligations, except at some point to die. And while many members joined because of the appeal of affordable death care, the most passionate members were committed to abolishing the practice of high-cost funerals altogether. The emphasis on education and advocacy for alternatives to high-cost funerals made memorial societies unique. Interestingly, memorial societies almost always relied on funeral directors. They either negotiated contracts with funeral directors who were willing to buck the disapproval of their colleagues, as one member described it, or the society distributed a list of funeral homes that had reasonable rates in the area. Some memorial societies opened their own crematoria or funeral facilities, like PMA has more recently. But memorial societies have always had an uneasy relationship with funeral directors. While memorial society members thought that simplicity, dignity, and economy in death was a reasonable goal, and you'll often hear that phrase as a motto, most funeral directors were appalled at this idea. One funeral industry spokesman denounced simple funerals as, quote, a communist plot to undermine the American way of life. Funeral reform activist Ernest Morgan explained that the statement missed the mark, but not very far. Not by very far. He acknowledged that there was a plot, but it was to overthrow what is phony, ostentatious, and exploitative in American life. But from the start, the funeral industry kept a close watch on memorial societies. Funeral directors worried that funeral reform activists were far more dangerous than the average funeral director realizes, for they are fanatics. They are the paraders for human rights, the picketers of meetings and institutions that displease them, the shouters and hecklers and demonstrators for any number of causes. Sounds pretty evil, right? So you can see the activist reputation that memorial societies had from the beginning. PMA, I think, was ahead of the trend. It took the rest of the country 20 or so more years to wake up to the alarming rise in funeral costs. In 1960, the average funeral cost somewhere around $1,200, which was a lot, still kind of a lot, just in terms of money. Funerals were the third largest purchase a family made after a house and a car. Partly the cost had to do with the level of service that funeral directors had come to provide. So as some of you probably know, up until the mid to late 19th century, funerals were simple affairs. Cabinet makers and carpenters provided coffins. Family members or neighbors, usually women, prepared and clothed the dead, and burial was swift. Then several factors converged to create undertaking as a trade. Urbanization and crowding in metropolitan areas meant families didn't always have the space to care for their own dead. Immigration, as well as internal migration, meant that some families and communities were displaced, leading them to pay for services that would have otherwise been done for free by community members. Embalming was popularized during the gold rush and the Civil War, and it continued to rise in prominence, especially as urban crowding fueled concerns about public health and sanitation. And undertakers took this as an opportunity to stake their claim as guardians of cleanliness and stewards of modernity. So by the turn of the 20th century, Americans were increasingly entrusting their loved ones to undertakers whose duties expanded to include removing, embalming, and cosmeticizing the body, selling caskets and vaults, arranging the purchase of flowers and burial plots, coordinating with clergy, renting funeral vehicles, and planning the viewing of the body and the funeral ceremony, all at rapidly rising costs. By mid-century, funeral directors had positioned themselves as necessary waypoints between life and death, often successfully lobbying to have their services legally required in many states, which confused people about what was legally required in other states. And today, many people still think that embalming is required after death, and with some rare exceptions, it's not. And this brings us to the fun part, where memorial societies started to respond more vocally in the 1960s. Especially notable is Jessica Mitford's book, The American Way of Death, which was, which was a scorching and unexpectedly hilarious critique of the funeral industry. The book became an instant bestseller, and reading the book today, it's not hard to see why. Mitford was an excellent writer. Here's just a little sample. She writes, "Alas, poor Yorick, how surprised he would be to see how his counterpart today is whisked off to a funeral parlor and is in short order sprayed, sliced, pierced, pickled, trussed, trimmed, creamed, waxed, painted, rouged, and neatly dressed, transformed from a common corpse into a beautiful memory picture." And elsewhere, she has said, "You may not be able to change the world, but at least you can embarrass the guilty." So in addition to the quality of her writing, Mitford also was tapping into a growing consumer rights movement. Americans were demanding greater safety and transparency about how products were made. People wanted to know that their food was not going to poison them, that they could have access to fair credit. They wanted to be protected from false advertising, to know more about their medications. Ralph Nader's 1965 book, Unsafe at Any Speed, brought attention to the automobile industry's excuse me, blatant disregard for safety. The book generated lots of publicity and a strong government response, and Mitford's book followed a similar pattern. The Senate conducted hearings in 1964, investigating unethical practices in the funeral industry. Eventually, this led to the Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Consumer Protection to institute what became called the Funeral Rule to force some transparency in the industry, but that rule didn't go into effect until 1984, and we can debate its effectiveness today. So there's plenty more to say here, but I'll just note that in the 60s, people were questioning all kinds of authority, well-respected professionals from a lot of different areas, and were working to create a more responsive and responsible relationship between producers and consumers. Now, I want to pose a question that I've had all the while conducting this research, and it's why weren't memorial societies more racially diverse, either historically or currently? And I can see from your opening this morning that this is something that's really on your minds, which I'm glad to see. So I'll talk about what I think was going on, but I invite you to help me think through this. So in theory, from the beginning, memorial societies supported each family's basic right to choose the type of ceremony that they wanted to commemorate their dead. Funeral reform activist Ernest Morgan argued that this freedom to choose how to memorialize the dead is basic to our way of life. Nevertheless, from the start, memorial societies endorsed immediate cremation at reasonable pre-established costs, to be followed by a dignified memorial service. And you can see, you might not be able to read the text here, but this is an advertisement for People's Memorial in the Seattle Daily Times from 1959, asking, "Do you believe in simple funerals?" And this endorsement of cremation, followed by a simple service, really hasn't changed over the past 84 years, although there's definitely more language around choice. So where cremation was unavailable or inappropriate in the early years of memorial societies, they recommended burial in a plain coffin as soon as possible without either embalming or a funeral. But I want to highlight here that cremation was a surprising choice even at the time, or especially at the time. The practice was common among the small number of Sikhs, Buddhists, and Hindus in the US, but overall cremation rates across the country were low. The rate was about 2.5% in 1939 when PMA was founded. It grew to 4% by 1967. Today it's over 55%, and we can probably thank memorial societies in part for that. But the choice of cremation was largely an economic one. It was as little as 1/10 the cost of a typical funeral. But cremation was neither culturally accommodating nor widely available. Orthodox Jewish communities were not allowed to cremate their dead, nor were Muslims or Catholics until 1963 when the ban for Catholics was lifted. Crematoria were much harder to find than funeral homes. In the late 50s, when PMA ran that advertisement, there were about 200 across the US. But the emphasis on cremation highlights the belief that among memorial societies that viewing the remains of the dead was unnecessary. Unitarian Reverend Aaron Gilmartin argued, "It is the centrality of the body in our services which has misled us. We come together to celebrate the life that was lived, the spirit of the person, but our observances all emphasize the body." Critics denounced the practice as uncivilized, pagan, and immature. And this became a central debate between memorial societies and funeral directors. As historian Gary Latterman argued, display of the remains became the defining feature of the American funeral over the 20th century. To target this practice, as memorial societies did, was to threaten the entire funeral industry. Mitford called this debate the battle of the bodies. But this wasn't the only concern. Funeral reformers took issue with nearly every aspect of conventional funerals. According to Reverend Josiah Bartlett of Seattle University's Unitarian Church, riding in a hearse was an ostentatious nuisance that blocked traffic and offered no comfort to the family. He also wrote that the excessive floral display, the quilted coffin lining, the morbid curiosity, the procession to view the remains, as well as the sentimental hymns and syrupy music, the professional solemnity, the euphemisms, all of it was in bad taste, he argued. The young minister instead called for a simple and sensible procedure, and none of you will be surprised to learn that he was an early and ardent supporter and member of PMA. However, the idea of a funeral that did not center the body was a concept that gained little traction among African Americans. African American funerals, typically called homegoings, were and remain elaborate, often costly festive gatherings centered around the embalmed and cosmeticized body. On the surface, many of the features that Bartlett might have called in bad taste, but actually these celebrations were crucial, not just for community healing during a period of loss and grief, but also for community building. And here I have a picture on the slide of a funerary portrait taken by James Vandersea, who's an amazing photographer. And there's a lot of portraits like this in his book called Harlem Book of the Dead, which came out in '78, but he was active in the 20s and 30s especially. So this was something, this idea that elaborate funerals could be a source of community healing was something that Jessica Mitford and her Memorial Society colleagues, I think, missed entirely in their critique of funeral directors. While homegoings shared many of the features of funerals that memorial societies criticized, the meanings attached to those features and the associations that funeral directors had in these communities were very different. Because of the violently segregated conditions under which funeral directing developed as a profession in the early 20th century, African-American funeral directors were, African-American funeral directing was very different from the white funeral profession. African-American funeral directors provided an essential service that most white businesses would not provide. As a result, the career became one of the most financially stable jobs to African-Americans in the 20th century. This meant that funeral directors were often also the philanthropists and de facto leaders of their communities. They were liaising with white leadership, dispensing advice, material assistance, and financial aid in their neighborhoods and communities. While white supremacists waged a bloody war to maintain segregation, African-American funeral directors developed a distinctive scope of service that involved using their professional skills to protect and support Black people. Not only were Black undertakers responsible for caring for dead bodies that often bore the evidence of trauma and neglect, they worked with the knowledge that they too were potential targets. As the civil rights movement accelerated in the 1960s, many Black funeral directors took on leadership roles in activist organizations, while others offered their establishments as organizing spaces or hideouts for civil rights activists who were pursued by whites. Some provided food and money for imprisoned activists, as Claire Collins Harvey of Mississippi did for the Freedom Riders in 1961. Others printed voter registration instructions on funeral fans or donated money to fledgling African-American publications. Still others secretly aided federal investigations, while some strategically used their embalming and restoration skills to seek justice. And I have on this slide here an image from the Parade for Victory, an NAACP protest, and it's a sign that says "Here lies Jim Crow," and a kind of protest coffin is being carried down the street. So funerals were also not just private affairs, they could be poignant political statements, not just the mock funeral that we have here on the slide, but certainly real funerals as well. The most famous but far from only example of this was in the aftermath of 14-year-old Emmett Till's lynching in 1955. Here's a picture of Till and his mother. His mother insisted on a public open casket funeral and invited the press and photographers to attend. The funeral director dressed Till's body in a suit, but accepted Mamie Till Bradley, his mother's, insistence that he not reconstruct or beautify Till's corpse. Bradley stated, "I wanted the whole world to see what they had done to my boy." And in this way, Bradley harnessed the power of a distinctively American way of death to fight for social and political justice for the living. So in the past, memorial societies failed to connect their efforts for simplicity, dignity, and economy in death with African Americans and many other Americans' struggle for dignity in life. Ultimately, the tensions between memorial societies and the funeral industry neglected the fact that many African Americans valued elaborate funerals where the remains were displayed because of the persistent devaluation of Black life and the long record of desecrating Black bodies in the US. Elaborate funerals were a moment to push back against a history of forced economic instability, as well as an opportunity to support local Black businesses. So I want to wrap up here by clarifying that my main aim is not to call into question the mission of PMA or its fellow memorial societies. Rather, I want to highlight their history and also their potential moving forward for creatively rethinking how to welcome and support cultural diversity while striving for simplicity, dignity, and economy. And I hope PMA continues its commitment to funeral reform and death care equity as social justice issues. So that's all I have for you. Thank you. You can email me with suggestions, questions, rants, and contestations at deborah.streahle@yale.edu. And thanks again for sharing your time with me. I'll put a couple additional resources in the chat in just a moment. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for that interesting, insightful talk about the funeral industry and how it's changed. Your perspective on history really highlights how significant PMA is and how impactful we still can be. Switching subjects, I was reminded of Wizard of Oz, where there were a big curtain, and we were wondering who was behind that curtain making this event possible. So I wanted to thank especially Beverly Chick and Bonnie Bazell for this amazing event. They're in the background answering questions, figuring out technology, queuing up videos. Thank you so much. This has been a fascinating program today. Well, we're almost at the end of the 2023 annual meeting, but we need to give away the gift basket before we close out. This year, our gift basket includes a remembrance box from Boann. In it, you will find items to support grief process and provide tangible ways for remembering the loved one. And the winner is, I just got the winner here, Catherine Nelson. So Catherine, I think Beverly has your contact information and will get your winnings to you. I want to, we'll reach out about delivering the prize. I want to personally thank all of you for joining us this Saturday, spending your time with us. Make sure you are signed up for our newsletter to stay in the loop about what we're doing and what's going on in the funeral industry at large. We're putting the link for sign up in the chat right now. If you have any questions, check out our website or email us. Our email is also being put in the chat right now. So with that, the 2023 annual meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you all for coming.